Okay, now we're going to take a look at wrapping up our login form into a modal for aesthetic reasons. No other reason. Obviously our login system works, but it could do with looking a little bit better. And it will give us an opportunity to see how we can add modals to our application as well. So let's head back to VS Code and see how we're going to set this up. So let's just close everything down inside here. And modals are going to have the ability to open from anywhere inside our app. And in order to control the opening and closing of modals, then we'll configure this in a store. And we'll create a new store specifically for modals. So we'll call it modal store.ts. And inside here, what we'll do, we'll say export default class, and we'll call it modal store. And our modal is going to be an object. And inside our modal, we're going to have an open property, which we're going to set to false. And in the body, we'll just set this to null initially. And then we'll add a constructor. And once again, we'll use the make auto observable and pass lis as its parameter. And then we'll add a method to open the modal. And we're going to pass in content as a parameter. And what is the content going to be? Well, if we take a look at our login form, because this is what we're going to populate inside our modal, then we can see that the login form itself is of type JSX element. So what we could do is also strongly type this as well in our application. And what we can specify is that the content is going to be of type JSX.element. And what we'll do is we'll say list.modal.open equals true, and we can say list.modal.body equals the content here. And we're getting an error, of course, because we haven't typed our object here. So what we can do is we can specify a type above this, and we'll create an interface and call it modal, and we'll specify open is a boolean, and we'll specify the body is either a JSX element or it's going to be null. And then we can specify the modal type here as modal. And then the error goes away. And we'll also add a method to close the modal. So we'll say close modal equals, and we'll say list.modal.open is equal to false, and we'll say list.modal.body is equal to null. And of course, because we've added a new store, we need to add this to our store.ts. So we'll open this up and we'll add our modal store of type modal store, and then we'll just add this into our store and say modal store and new modal store and add the parentheses there. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a modal component which is going to act as a container for the React components that we're going to open inside of it. And what we'll do, we'll just go up to somewhere central in our app. The common folder will suffice for this, and we'll create another new folder and we'll call it modals. And inside here we'll right click and create a new file, and we'll call this one modal container.tsx. And inside here this is just going to be a normal React component, so we'll say import React from React, and we'll say export default function, and we'll call it modal container. And we're going to need to go and get our modal store for this component. So we'll say const and modal store equals use store. And while we're here, let's just add the observer, because we're going to need to know whether or not our observable has changed inside here. So we'll wrap our function inside an observer. And then what we can do is we can return. And inside here, we'll use the modal that we get from Semantic UI React. And we'll give it some properties. And the modal takes an open property. And we're going to set this to the modal store.open or modal store.modal.open to see if the modal is actually open. And we'll also give it its onClose function. And we'll say modal store.closeModal, and we'll also give it a size property, and we'll just set it to mini. And inside our modal we're going to add modal.content, And all we're going to put inside our modal content is the modal store.modal.body. And of course, this is going to be a React component that gets replaced with this. Now, our modals are going to be able to be opened from anywhere in our application. So just like toasts, we're going to need to add this modal container at a high level in our application. So we're going to open the app.tsx once again. And just underneath our toast container, we're going to add a modal container. And we don't need to pass this any properties. So now we can go ahead and use this modal container to open a modal, and we'll do this from our home page where we've got our login button. And instead of opening a link, what we'll do is we'll add an on-click to this instead. But of course we need to bring in our modal store into our home page as well. So let's just add this to the destructured imports and add modal store. And then in our login button, we can add an on-click event. And we need to pass parameters, so we'll open up some parentheses and add the function, and we'll say modal store dot open modal. And then all we need to do here is pass a JSX element. And we can specify in angle brackets our login form component. And what we'll also do, since we're here, we'll also copy this button and we'll add a register button here as well. And of course, we need to put this inside a fragment. So let's open up some angle brackets to cut our buttons in and paste them inside here. Let's try reformatting. And once again, that's almost worked. And the second one, of course, is going to be for register. And because we don't have our register form yet, what we'll do is we'll just make this an H1 tag. And we'll say H1 to add the closing tag, and inside here we'll just say register. So before we go test, what we'll also do is we'll go back to our user store so that we can close the modal after a user has successfully logged in. And let's just scroll up to what we're doing inside our login. So the rest of this code we still want to leave in place, but after we've pushed them to the activities, what we can do is say store.modal store, and then we can simply close the modal. And it is as simple as that. Now what we should have in our app, if we just go ahead and let's go back to the home page, and if we click on login, we can now see that we have our modal. And if we attempt to log in as bob@test.com with the correct password and press return, we go and log in, we load our activities, and the modal closes. That's exactly what we're looking for. And the only thing I would like to do is just add a bit more content inside the modal and just give it a title property. So let's go back to VS Code and we'll open up the login form once again. And inside here, just inside the form itself, we'll add a header. And we'll say as equals H2, and we'll give it content equal to login to reactivities. And we'll give it a color equal to teal. And we'll give it text align equal to center. And if we just go back and see how this is looking, and we click on login, there we don't see our title, but I think I need to refresh the page first. And let's give this another go. And there we see our title, login to reactivities, and this all looks good. And we can click on our register, of course, but we still need to add the component for this, and we'll take a look at this next.